The night she ripped my daughter's things across the room, I could hear the plastic of a bracelet snapping like a tiny, terrible promise breaking. My daughter called me from the hallway, voice small and trembling, and her father told her to get in the car and leave. That was the night everything changed. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone you love get hurt, hit like and subscribe. And drop a comment if you've ever stood up for a child. Today's story is about a mother, a daughter, and the moment one family chose loyalty over love. We weren't naive. My ex and I had a past we hadn't expected to last forever. He cheated. We split. We tried to heal, separately. Life moved on. Therapy, apologies that didn't always land, and eventually new relationships. Years later, he met someone else, not the person who'd broken us originally, and they married. For a while, it looked like the world had smoothed itself over. By then, my daughter was 15. She was quiet in the way teenagers are, but she was also bright and tender. The kind of kid who notices the small things, who sits at the kitchen table, what someone says under their breath, whether a parent remembers a test or a rehearsal. She called me when she was home. She called me when she was scared. I took her to therapy after she told me she felt like an outsider at their house. I didn't want to overreact. I wanted to give her tools, not weapons. At first the tension was small. The stepmom would comment on gifts or roll her eyes when my daughter liked something too old-fashioned. Then it grew teeth. The stepmom began asserting what it meant to show love. And apparently, according to her, buying matching jewelry for both the stepmom and the daughter was a crime against nuance. My daughter told me she felt watched, measured, like she was standing on borrowed ground. I tried to stay out of the middle. I have no problem with my ex's wife as a person. Neither of us tried to be friends, but the stepmom's behavior wore threads thin. She took to distance, basic courtesy. My ex would tell me when I asked if they were okay, but nothing more. My daughter started to disappear into herself, and that terrified me more than any confrontation. One day my daughter called breathless. She'd been in her room, told her stepmom she'd do chores later, and the world tipped. The stepmom stormed in, started tearing down shelves, flung clothes onto the floor, and stomped through a life my daughter had built there. A bracelet my ex had given her, expensive, celebrated by a father, snapped. Siblings watched. My daughter hid behind the phone and asked me what to do. Her father told her to come to my house while he dealt with his wife. Then, the next day, he sent her a message that landed like a guillotine. The situation wasn't working anymore. He said he had to put his wife first. If my daughter felt anxious or disrespected, then, his words, she was toxic. She turned 18 around that time. Legally, she could choose silence. Practically, a wedge drove in. No contact between father and daughter. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. My daughter tried a few times to reach out. Some attempts were politely deflected. Others disappeared into a void. What they didn't realize, what I could feel in marrow-deep ways, was that cutting someone out doesn't erase them. It just reshuffles the ache. I watched my daughter apply for college, watch late-night movies, cry at a song, and laugh at memes with the same ferocity she used to save for her father's praise. Therapy helped. Her voice got stronger. She learned boundaries, and she also learned how to carry grief without letting it carry her. I wrestled with anger, not theatrical, rage-filled scenes, but the slow burn that comes when someone you trusted chooses convenience over a child's safety. I wondered if they'd been looking for a reason to stop contact. I wondered if my ex's message was written before the tearing night, rehearsed as an exit strategy. Those were questions that had no good answers. There's a kind of revenge that doesn't humiliate or harm. It clarifies. I refuse to beg. I refuse to call his phone at 2 a.m. and plead. Instead, I collected facts, kept my daughter supported, and listened to the people who mattered. When I found out, from my ex's parents, of all people, that they were moving away, something shifted. Their move gave me one good weapon, a chance to show in public that cutting someone off had consequences. I didn't plan a spectacle. I planned a presence. We drove to the town where they were leaving, not to beg for love, but to be visible. My daughter, now an adult, would be the one to walk into the moment, unarmed but unapologetic. She would speak not with the sharp teeth of revenge, but with the steady authority of someone who had been hurt and refused to be erased. The day of the farewell, the house smelled of boxes and cheap coffee. The stepmom was in the kitchen, checking the movers list. The siblings were scattered, awkward and silent. My daughter stood at the threshold, hands clasped, and her voice, soft but clear, filled the room. "Hi," she said. "You're moving. I heard. I wanted to say goodbye." There was a silence long enough to make people uncomfortable. The stepmom's face folded. Some people wear masks of indifference until someone talks to them like a human being. My daughter continued, not to accuse but to narrate. "When I was 15, you came into my room and tore my things. You told me to get out. My dad told me to leave. That broke me. I've worked hard since then. I wanted you to know that I'm okay. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not demanding anything. I'm saying, I existed. You couldn't see me, but I existed." My ex's shoulders dropped like someone who had been carrying a weight he thought small until it crushed him. He didn't shout. He didn't make excuses. He looked at his daughter, the one he'd called toxic, and for a sliver of a moment, he saw her in full. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, quieter than she deserved. "Because you told me to leave," she said. "And because I thought you'd protect me." No tidy confessions followed. The stepmom murmured something about stress, and moving, and being overwhelmed. The siblings shifted. The neighbors pretended not to listen. But the real shift happened in small human ways. An in-law who'd been uneasy offered a hand to my daughter. A brother, embarrassed but honest, said he wished he'd spoken up sooner. My daughter didn't yell. She didn't cry in public. She stood, tall and small at once, and in that measure she had her victory. There was no dramatic courtroom reveal, no viral post shaming a woman into ruin. The payoff was quieter. My daughter reclaimed her story in front of the people who mattered most. She didn't need my ex to admit every wrong. She didn't need his wife to crumble. The payoff was her presence, showing up soberly in the place that had tried to erase her, and forcing the adults to look at the consequences of their choices. Afterwards, the stepmom left the room. My ex followed, not to beg for forgiveness, not to drive a wedge back in, but to talk, finally, as two adults who understood there would be no going back to the ignorance that let this happen. Whether that talk rebuilt anything is not the point. The point is that a child who was once shuffled off was now seen. I felt relief that was not triumphal. It was maternal, clean and level. Not because I'd won a fight, but because my daughter's dignity had not been eaten away by silence. She graduated, she pursued her life, and the space between us and them became honest air, not poisonous fog. I learned a lesson about the kinds of strength that matter. The one that turns fury into careful action. The one that protects without weaponizing pain. I learned that sometimes the only revenge worth having is watching the person you love grow into their own joy. Unbought, unbent real. People will always have the choice to protect convenience over children. You may not control their choices, but you can control how you respond. In this story, the truth didn't come as a scream. It came as a presence. And presence can be the most powerful form of justice. If this story hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear they're not invisible. Comment below with your own story of standing up for someone you love. Let's build a place where those voices are heard. Subscribe for more true stories that remind us how courage looks in ordinary lives.